Welcome to Men in the City, a channel about finance, freedom, and neo-masculinity. This is a video that I never wanted to make. I'm not somebody that has ever been very comfortable being vulnerable. I've never liked putting personal details about myself or my life out on the internet, certainly not in a YouTube video. But I realized if I was going to connect with an audience, you had to hear from me. You had to know about my story and where I'm coming from. The last 2 decades have been a very difficult time for the world, but especially for young men, and I was one of them. I view life as a series of breakdowns and buildups. For me, 2009 was a key inflection point in which my life fell apart. I had been in the Navy for a couple years. I was a surface warfare officer, and it had not worked. That's putting it mildly. It was a train wreck. My time in the service was extremely difficult for me because I was somebody that relished in freedom, spirit of adventure, initiative, and I've always had a rebellious nature. And the Navy is in many respects the antithesis of that. It's a very rigid, bureaucratic, hierarchical, and robotic experience. And in certain respects, that's what it needs to be in order for that organization to function properly. But unfortunately, it was like oil and water. And so I clashed with superiors. I didn't really fit into any of the roles that I pursued. And so in spite of being trained to do this for 5 years, it just didn't work. And in 2009, the Navy and I mutually agreed to separate. I felt liberated. I felt emancipated and immediately excited about a new world, a new life. But what also happened at the same time that I was completely oblivious to is that we had a global financial crisis, and that rocked the economy in ways that disrupted the normal pattern of life and job acquisition and career building and so forth. And I fell right into that abyss. I went years unemployed, underemployed, directionless. I didn't have much of a social life. I barely had any money. I had to move back home with my parents, which was an excruciating experience for me at the same time as many of my peers were going to Harvard Business School, or they were working for Fortune 500 companies, or they were advancing in their career. I was getting nowhere. I was stuck. And so I fell into depression. Fortunately, I kept at it. I read and I wrote for hours every day. I discovered YouTube, which opened up a library of information for me and led me to find people that helped me through the process. And eventually, after years and years of this, I had a friend who recommended I do an interview for a job that I did not want to do. It was in sales and marketing, things that I didn't know anything about and I didn't want to participate in. But I was desperate. I was in the jobless abyss and I needed a way out. So I took the job, and that began the next phase of my life in about 2014 or 15. And I had about a 5-year period of success. I finally made money. I had a nice apartment. I had a nice car. I finally had a social life and so forth. But after 5 years of doing that, I realized that the corporate 9-to-5 path was not mine. It was not for me. And so in 2019, I quit, and I immediately began to travel in search of a better life. I went to Montreal, Canada. I was in Hong Kong, China. I was in Tokyo, Japan. I was in Bangkok, Thailand. I was in Warsaw, Poland, and Paris, France, and so forth and so on, and various parts of the United States. And what I discovered on my path was that the world today is broken. The world has serious problems, not the least of which is a crisis of masculinity. Young men are abandoned, really, and in some cases they are the brunt of criticism meted out by a very politically correct and hostile bureaucratic world. And so I began a blog, and that has become this YouTube channel called Men in the City, which is all about what I call neo-masculinity, a mass awakening to a very brutal world that we're living in that's about to change, a structural realignment, a revolution in all kinds of ways: technology, monetary systems, political organizations. And this channel is going to be about how we get through that transition and how we succeed on the other side of it. So stay tuned for more to come. We'll talk soon.